My name is Odysseus. I just finished fighting a 10-year war at Troy, sleeping in the mud, eating moldy rations, watching my brothers fall one by one beside me. I came out of it with over a dozen scars. But the good news is, we won, and the key to winning was my idea, the famous Trojan horse. I became a hero. You set off with a ship full of plunder, 12 ships in total, and hundreds of brothers who had fought beside me through everything, ready to go home. My home is on a small island called Ithaca. My wife is there, and my son, who was barely a month old when I left. All I could think about was getting home, living out the rest of my life in peace and comfort. But what you don't know is, the nightmare called going home had only just begun. This is not a romantic myth. This is the true story of a man toyed with by the gods, who endured countless bloodshed and death, and who, in the end, to reclaim everything he had lost, carried out a brutal massacre. My road home was doomed to be anything but smooth from the very start. First, the island of the Lotus-Eaters. We had been drifting at sea for a long time when we came upon an island covered in strange plants. I sent a few brothers ahead to scout. The islanders gave them a plant called the lotus flower. This flower had a terrifying power. Anyone who ate it instantly forgot their homeland, forgot their wives and children, forgot every painful memory they had. They no longer wanted to sail. They only wanted to stay on that island forever, eating flowers and sleeping every day. But I couldn't let them stay. I charged in myself and grabbed them by the hair, dragging them back to the ships by force. They cried and struggled, but I bound them with thick ropes and lashed them tight to their rowing benches. I ordered them to keep rowing. Next, I led my brothers to an island inhabited by a race of one-eyed giants, the Cyclops. We were hungry. We crept into one of the giants' caves looking for something to eat. Inside, there was sheep's milk and cheese. We were eating happily when the giant came back. This giant was called Polyphemus. He was the son of the sea god Poseidon. He didn't care that you were some hero of the Trojan War. In his eyes, you were just snacks that had broken into his home. The giant wasted no words. He reached out his enormous hand and seized two of my brothers. He lifted them like you'd pick up puppies, then slammed them down onto the ground with full force. Their skulls cracked open. The sound of shattering bones echoed through the cave. Then the giant tore them into pieces and swallowed them whole, flesh and bone, like eating a snack. When he was done, he washed it down with a gulp of sheep's milk. I hid behind a rock, watching my brother's blood pool across the floor, too afraid to even breathe loudly. Over the next 2 days, the giant ate 4 more of my brothers. I had to find a way out. I am clever after all. I found a massive olive wood stake, sharpened it to a point, and hardened it in the fire. Then, I took out the strong wine I'd brought from the ship and offered it to the giant. He had never tasted wine so strong. A few gulps and he was drunk, snoring so loud it shook the cave walls. My brothers and I lifted that red-hot stake and drove it straight into the giant's eye. The burning wood pierced the eyeball. Blood and the fluid from inside the eye burst outward. His eyelashes and brow hissed and sizzled as they burned. The root of the eyeball crackled and popped in the fire. The giant let out a shriek of pure agony, wrenched out the stake, and thrashed wildly around the cave. We had already hidden ourselves among the sheep. The next morning, when the giant led his flock out to graze, we had tied ourselves underneath the sheep's bellies and slipped out of the cave undetected. Up to this point, everything I had done was flawless. But just as I got back to the ship and we were pulling away from the shore, I made a fatal mistake. I thought too highly of myself. I couldn't accept slipping away like some nameless nobody. I had to let that monster know who had beaten it, so I stood at the stern of the ship and shouted my name out loud. My name is Odysseus. I thought I was declaring victory. But what I was actually doing was sending the sea god Poseidon my exact coordinates. The blinded giant prayed to his father Poseidon, cursing me to never find my way home. And if I did make it back, I would lose every single one of my brothers. From that day on, I became a man cursed by the sea. My road home had become a long and hopeless exile. In the years that followed, I endured disaster after disaster. When I left Troy, I had 12 ships and hundreds of brothers. But when I finally returned to Ithaca, I was the only one left. How did they die? Let's look at what happened to you along the way. Next, we came to a place called Aiaia. The island was home to a beautiful sorceress named Circe. I sent half my brothers ahead to explore. Circe welcomed them warmly and set before them cheese and honeyed wine, laced with a magic potion. When they drank it, Circe gave a light wave of her wand, and their heads became the heads of pigs. Their bodies sprouted coarse pig hair. Their hands and feet became trotters. Their minds were still human. They knew exactly who they were, but they could only make the sounds of pigs. Circe herded them into a sty and threw them a handful of acorns. When I heard what had happened, I took the antidote given to me by a god and forced Circe to turn them back into men. But this was only a temporary reprieve. Death was still waiting for them up ahead. Before leaving Circe's island, the sorceress told me that to find the way home, I first had to go to one place, the Underworld. I had to sail to the very edge of the world, to reach that vast ocean where sunlight never falls. There, I was to dig a pit and pour in the blood of a sheep, to summon the dead and ask the prophet Tiresias for directions. I did as I was told. The smell of the sheep's blood drifted out across the dark water. The dead came swarming from every direction. They were wisps of gray smoke, no bodies, only 2 white points of light for eyes. They scrambled over each other trying to reach the pit of blood, because only by drinking the blood could they briefly regain their consciousness and speak. I brandished my sword, holding the other spirits back, letting the prophet Tiresias drink first. Tiresias drank the blood and told me the way home, along with the traps I had to avoid. Then I let the other spirits approach. I saw my old comrades in arms, the brothers who had fallen on the battlefield at Troy. They drank the blood and recognized me and told me of the suffering they endured after death. Then I saw my mother. She had died not long after I left. She died from longing for me. Her spirit drew close to the pit of blood, drank from it, and recognized me. I wanted to hold her. I reached out my arms and rushed toward her, but my hands passed straight through her body. There was nothing to hold. She was only smoke. I tried 3 times. 3 times. The same result. Each time, my hands passed through her, like passing through air. My mother said to me, "This is death, my child. When a person dies, the soul becomes like a dream. No more flesh, no more bone." At the entrance to the Underworld, I knelt and wept for a long time. After leaving the Underworld, we encountered the Sirens. The Sirens' song was unbearably beautiful, but anyone who heard it would go mad and leap into the sea, swim toward the rocks, and be devoured by the Sirens. Circe had warned me in advance. I had to plug everyone's ears with beeswax. I did exactly that. I had all my brothers stop up their ears, but I didn't plug my own. I wanted to hear for myself what that legendary song actually sounded like. I ordered my brothers to lash me to the mast. No matter how I struggled, no matter how I ordered them to untie me, they were to keep rowing. When the song reached me, I thrashed wildly against the ropes. The rope cut into my flesh. I screamed at my brothers to release me. I wanted to throw myself into the sea, but my brothers couldn't hear me. They just kept their heads down and rowed with everything they had. I became the only man in the world who had heard the siren song and lived. We still had to pass through an extremely dangerous strait. Circe had told me that on either side of this strait lurked a monster. On the left was Charybdis, a colossal whirlpool that swallowed the entire sea 3 times a day and spat it back out. If my ship were sucked in, the entire vessel and every man aboard would be pulverized inside the vortex. Not one would survive. On the right was Scylla, living in a cave high up on a cliff face, with 6 heads, each one lined with 3 rows of teeth. Her necks were long enough to reach out from the cave and snatch 6 men at once. Circe told me not to try to fight Scylla. It was impossible. The only thing I could do was hug Scylla's side and row past as fast as possible, letting her take 6 men in exchange for the survival of the rest. I didn't tell my brothers. I knew that if I told them, they would freeze with fear. and the whole ship would be swallowed by Charybdis. So I told them to row with everything they had, keep their eyes fixed on the whirlpool to the left, and don't look back. As our ship passed beneath that cliff face, Scylla's 6 heads shot out of the cave simultaneously. 6 of my brothers, without any warning, were seized by 6 heads at the same moment. They thrashed in midair, screaming my name. Their eyes were filled with terror and despair. Then they were dragged up into the cave. I stood at the bow and watched it all happen. I did nothing. In all my years at sea, that was the most heartbreaking sight I ever witnessed. But my brothers were still not able to escape their fate. We were stranded on an island called Thrinacia. The island was home to a herd of magnificent cattle, but they were the sacred cattle of the sun god Helios. Whoever ate them would die. We were stranded for a month. The food on the ships had long since run out. Everyone was starving, eyes hollow with hunger, on the verge of breaking. I warned my brothers, do not touch those cattle. Then went alone into the hills to pray, and there I fell asleep. While I was asleep, my brothers couldn't bear the hunger any longer. They slaughtered the sacred cattle and roasted the meat. By the time I woke up, it was already too late. I could smell the roasting meat. I confronted them in anguish, but I didn't eat a single bite myself. 6 days later, the winds changed. We rushed out to sea, but Helios had already reported us to Zeus. Zeus sent down a terrible thunderstorm. A bolt of lightning split the ship apart. Every brother who had eaten the sacred meat was swept into a black whirlpool and drowned. Because I had not eaten the meat, I clung to a broken piece of the mast and drifted in the waves. Hundreds of brothers, 12 ships. Now there was only me, alone, on a boundless black sea. Continuing your solitary drift. 20 years in total. 10 years of war. 10 years adrift at sea. When I finally set foot on the soil of Ithaca, I was no longer the proud king I had once been. I was a man with nothing, a wanderer, covered in wounds. But did I think coming home meant it was over? No, my home had long since been occupied by others. In the 20 years I had been away, 108 young noblemen from the island had taken up permanent residence in my palace. They slaughtered my sheep, drank my wine, slept with my maids. Their stated reason was, Odysseus must be dead. We are here to court his wife Penelope. But in reality, this was a naked seizure of power. Whoever married Penelope could legally take over my palace, my lands, and become the new ruler of Ithaca. They had even plotted to ambush at sea and kill my son Telemachus, who had just come of age, to cut out the route entirely. I couldn't just walk in. I was alone. They had 108 young, armed noblemen. So I followed Athena's advice and used magic to disguise myself as an old, ugly beggar. I walked into my own home. I watched those men feasting and reveling in the great hall. One nobleman named Antinous took a dislike to me. He picked up a solid wooden footstool and slammed it hard into my right shoulder. I endured it. I stood there like a stone. I didn't strike back. I was waiting for my moment, a moment when I could lock every single one of them inside the room and leave not a single one standing. My wife Penelope set a challenge. Whoever could string my old bow and shoot an arrow through the holes of 12 axe heads in a row would win her hand. Over 100 noblemen took their turn, but they had spent their days eating, drinking, and idling. Their strength was long gone. They went red in the face, straining, even rubbing thick grease onto the bow, and still couldn't get the bowstring on. Then I stepped forward. I strung the bow. One arrow, straight through all 12 axe heads. Then I tore off my beggar's disguise. I spun around, leapt up onto the threshold, and blocked the only door. My son Telemachus had already secretly removed every weapon from the great hall. 108 unarmed, overfed men were locked in by me and my son inside a sealed room. The first arrow I shot straight through Antinous' throat. The arrowhead burst out through the back of his neck. His head lolled to one side. Blood erupted like a fountain from his nostrils. As he fell, He kicked over the table. Roasted meat and bread flew into the pool of blood. The great hall exploded into chaos. They scattered like headless flies, some begging for mercy, some trying to claw their way up the walls to escape. But I didn't hesitate for a single moment. I stood at the door, arrow after arrow, each one finding its mark: chest, eye, stomach. Some were shot through the liver, writhing on the ground in agony. Some were shot through the back of the skull, faces slamming into the floor. When my arrows were spent, I took up a spear and a bronze sword and moved in for close combat. It was a one-sided slaughter, like a lion that has just finished feeding on a bull, chest and face dripping with dark blood, a sight to make your blood run cold. The walls of the great hall, the pillars, all smeared with brains and blood. But the most brutal act was reserved for the traitor. His name was Melanthius, a goatherd in my household. But he had betrayed me. He had crept up to the storeroom to fetch weapons for the suitors. I ordered my son and my servants to drag him to the courtyard. They first cut off his nose and ears with a bronze knife. Then they tore out his genitals while he was still alive and threw them to the dogs nearby to eat. Finally, as he screamed in the courtyard, they hacked off his hands and feet. The men were dealt with. I turned my attention to the women. I had 50 maids in my household. 12 of them, while I was away, had slept with the suitors. In my eyes, they were traitors. I ordered these 12 maids to carry the bodies of their lovers out of the hall with their own hands, then scrub the blood and brains from the great hall until it was clean. When they had finished cleaning, my son said, "They don't deserve to die that quickly." So they strung a long ship's cable across the courtyard. Like a hunter stretching a net to catch a flock of doves, the maids' necks were looped into the nooses one by one. Then the rope was yanked tight. They were left dangling in midair. Their feet twitched for a while, but before long, they went completely still. The massacre was over. I had finally reclaimed my throne, my possessions, my wife. I took a hot bath. I put on clean clothes. I held my wife in my arms. This is the story of Odysseus. 10 years of brutal war. 10 years of exile at sea, watching hundreds of brothers die in the mouths of monsters. And finally, in his own home, carrying out a massacre of blood and flesh. Odysseus did make it home, but he left his soul forever in those black waves. The one who came back alive was no longer the bold and spirited hero he had once been.